Good afternoon. I'm Rosalinda Sanquiche. I'm the Director of Sustainability Training and Consulting with CSE, the Center for Sustainability and Excellence. And I also work with the group on our research. Every year we focus on a particular area. Last year we reported on findings for North America. This year we have revisited our 2016 research on Silicon Valley. One of the important aspects of our research is to see what are the trends within particular sectors or within particular regions around the world that focus on sustainability. Here we are looking at sustainability and corporate social responsibility specific to companies and organizations that are based in Silicon Valley. Our research examines 100 companies, which are large and multinational enterprises. These are the same companies that we explored for consistency in 2016. Some of the characteristics that we're looking at for these companies include size, type, sector, sustainability practices, and sustainability ratings. And we try to standardize these across the different companies. We're looking specifically at what kinds of trends have evolved, and is there any particular analysis that will give us insight into those areas that inform comprehensive sustainability practices within a particular organization. What we're really trying to see is what is the state of affairs in terms of tech companies, finance companies, those organizations that are specific to Silicon Valley and the culture in Silicon Valley. Is that different from the findings that we have for North America? Which you can look at our 2018 research on the website www.csc-net.org. So from our research, we have several major trends that we found. Mostly that the companies themselves, 82% of them are large. They have over 1,000 employees. And 18% are multinational enterprises. So those employees are spread across the world. We did at one point have small, medium enterprises in 2016, but those companies have all grown to the large status. We're looking specifically at the sustainability reports put out by these companies. And what we've noticed is a significant increase. Of the 100 companies, 60% have sustainability reports, and that's up from 29% in 2016. Now, these reports have some very specific characteristics. For example, 50% of them use the GRI compliant reporting standards. And this is a uniform way that companies can provide data on their sustainability practices, that one company can be compared to another, because the GRI is modular and sector specific, allowing for someone to do due diligence and then kind of compare apples to apples. 37% of the reports have climate change component and use specifically the CDP in order to talk about those particular characteristics. 23% of the reports include reference to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this is one of the biggest changes that we've seen in sustainability reporting, whether it be in the technology sector, which is a heavy emphasis in Silicon Valley, or any sector at all. The Sustainable Development Goals were crafted at the national level, but they have been adopted by corporations. And that adoption ranges anywhere from a simple statement supporting any one of the 17 SDGs to a full integration of the SDGs in their sustainability strategy. That is to say that the SDGs have become part of the corporate strategy, part of its corporate business plan. 22% of reports have been externally assured. And this is of particular importance when one is looking at investors, when one is looking for transparency, the accuracy in their own reporting, and credibility. What we found is that the companies, almost all of them are publicly traded. Of the companies listed on the NASDAQ, 72% have a sustainability report, and of those listed on the New York Stock Exchange, 38% have a sustainability report. Now, this is a significant difference, and one can ask the question, well, why is that? Why would a company that is trading on one platform be more likely, so much more likely to have a sustainability report? And I think this is where you really want to take a look at leadership. NASDAQ has played a leading role in requiring and supporting sustainability reporting from its different companies on its platforms. Whereas the New York Stock Exchange, while it's certainly supportive, has not provided the same number of tools to facilitate that sustainability reporting, to provide key performance indicators that are significant, to even require reporting for some of the sub-indices. So NASDAQ has definitely played a higher role in wanting and asking for these kinds of reportings, and so it makes sense that companies on NASDAQ have a greater percentage of reports, sustainability reports. Another major trend is around the different comprehensive sustainability practices that we see. To have a comprehensive sustainability strategy, the company has to incorporate 6 specific focus areas. So companies need to have strategies around community, environment, ethics, employees, supply chain, and philanthropy. Of the 100 companies in this particular study, only 23 displayed a sustainability reporting strategy that involved all 6 of the focus areas. And that represents 38% of all the companies with sustainability reports. So that's something interesting to look at. Companies are putting out those sustainability reports, but they're not uniformly reporting on the same things or putting the emphasis on the same things. And when we want to think in terms of comprehensive, then we need to define sustainability in all of its multiple pillars. And in this case, we've identified those as community, environment, ethics, employee, supply chain, and philanthropy. And we're looking for some statement, doctrine, initiative, support in all of these as a comprehensive program. So Silicon Valley is working its way towards that, but they're not quite there yet. When we compare our current research to past research, what we found is that in the areas of community, environment, supply chain, and philanthropy, there's been a significant increase in reporting. So the companies are seeing these as important to their stakeholders and as worthy of putting in their attention. Employment held steady from the report 3 years ago, and surprisingly, ethics actually decreased as a reporting component. Of the different criteria, environment and ethics were the most reported overall. The importance of ESG ratings has definitely increased. Of the companies that were analyzed, 98% have an ESG ratings profile. And that really lets you know that investors doing their due diligence are looking for outside sources beyond the company in order to determine their sustainability activity. There are many, many different ESG rating organizations. We use CSR Hub in our research, and from CSR Hub we know that the top rated sectors are IT, semiconductors, computer software, financial services, medical devices, and biotechnology. This comes as no surprise for Silicon Valley, since these are some of the main industries within that particular area. So that they are some of the top-rated sectors makes perfect sense. I think it's really important to think about that this 98% that have ESG ratings, those are third-party ratings. That is not the company itself. So investors are looking for independent analysis of what companies are doing to support their sustainability efforts. And they're using that analysis in order to determine the level of investment they're going to give into any particular company. Now, if we look a little more closely at the company breakdown by size, we see that most of the companies are large, and as I said, when we did the research in 2016, there were some small, medium enterprises, but all of those have grown into the large category. And there is a definite component that is multinational. When you look deeply into the report, and I encourage all of you to get a copy for yourselves, you're going to see that the multinationals are some of the companies that have the most experience, the strongest strategies, the most comprehensive strategies when it comes to sustainability. And that makes a lot of sense given that regulations all around the world are asking for increased disclosure. If you operate in the European Union, for example, and you have more than 500 employees within a particular country, then you are required to have a sustainability report that discloses many of the aspects that we are looking for in our particular research. So the multinationals are held almost to a higher standard. They're certainly held to a higher rate of reporting and reporting analysis that they must do over the smaller companies. And I do smaller in quotation marks. We based much of our analysis on the GRI, and the GRI lists companies as listed or not listed, and this has a lot to do with whether they are a public company, a public entity, or whether they are held privately, which does highly correlate to whether they are listed on one of the stock exchanges, but it's not an exact correlation. But these companies are leaders and do tend to be publicly traded, do not tend to be held privately. Well, let's look a little more closely at the sustainability reporting itself. As mentioned earlier, 60% of the companies produce a sustainability report. Now, what do we mean by that? We are looking at those reports that are presented in a clear reporting format. They could be online, they could be a paper report, they could be a PDF, but there is tangible, clear information that they're providing, whether they're following GRI standards, for example, or not. It is not an ad hoc report, and there's tangible information that is being included. We were really quite surprised to see that so many of the technology companies, for all of their innovation and for all of their size, actually are not as dedicated to actively pursuing sustainability goals, and are instead happy to stop at the compliance level or to have that passive sustainability, where they are looking more at not doing anything bad, quotation marks, but also not looking at actively doing anything good, quotation marks. So Silicon Valley, with the expectation that they would be leaders because of the innovative technologies that they use, actually are not particularly leaders in sustainability, though there have been significant improvements over 20 years. Now, when we were looking at the different companies and looking at what it means to have a comprehensive sustainability strategy and to put that into practice, as I already said, we were looking at 6 games in particular, but let's go ahead and break that down a little bit. What does it mean? What do we mean when we talk about sustainability and community together? In this case, we're looking at community outreach. We're looking at participation in the community, whether it be volunteerism or having education programs. It's looking at how one is going to support the youth or employment programs within a community. So it's all the different ways in which a company is a citizen of its own community. When we look at the environment aspects, I think we're pretty accustomed already to what that means. Much of sustainability started from an environmental perspective, so we're looking at energy efficiencies, we're looking at facility operations, we're looking at materials, pollutants, carbon reduction, of all of those things that have an impact on the physical world and the carrying capacity of the globe itself. Environment is going to include air quality, water quality, soil quality. It's going to look at things like how are corporate practices affecting the health of those who are in the community. So you can see how these will overlap as well. The ethics component looks at governance. How is a corporation run? Does it have equity? Does it have fair pay practices? Things like that. Is it transparent? Is it moving beyond compliance? When we look at employees, this has a lot to do with how is the corporation treating its employees. And it goes beyond pay. We're looking at things like health and safety. We're looking at whether they support health insurance, whether they have family leave, whether they're actively looking and pursuing inclusivity and diversity. What is the company doing to make this a welcoming, safe environment where employees want to come to work and want to stay with that particular company? When we talk about supply chain, we're both looking at the resources that a company needs in order to develop its product and service, but we're also looking at where the company itself falls within its own client supply chain. So we're looking up and down, and the corporation is taking responsibility for employees, perhaps from one of their vendors. They are taking responsibility for how a resource has been developed, how it's been mined, how it's been grown, perhaps. The supply chain, you're not abdicating responsibility. The corporation is working with those suppliers to facilitate them being as sustainable as the corporation wants to be itself. And then finally, when we're looking at philanthropy, we're taking a look at what the company is doing from a foundation's perspective, what money it is putting into the community and community initiatives, where is that focus? Is it stakeholder driven? Is it driven by its employees? Is it driven by the C-suite? And how much of its efforts are they putting into philanthropic efforts? And which of those are long-term? Which of those apply to the company's core expertise? And here you can see a list of those companies from this year's research that approach each one of these and have taken some substantive action at one level or another. Now, when we're looking at the different focus areas for analysis, we really want to see which industries have a heavy emphasis on which particular criteria. And just by way of example, we're going to look here at ethics. And what we see is that an aggregate of all the companies and all the different categories, ethics is towards the top. Environment number 1, ethics number 2. When we look at the reports specifically, we have the same results, environment and ethics 1 and 2. And you can break down that analysis even farther to look at hardware, software, networking, cybersecurity, perhaps entertainment or telecommunications. So we're looking at both the aggregate and the specific and focused area. And across the board, we're seeing environment and ethics as taken the greatest priority. Now, one of the things that becomes really important is, what does this mean to investors? Why do they care? What are they looking at? And what kind of scoring do you want from a particular company? In our case, we partnered with CSR Hub as the ratings agency, and we were looking across the board to see what are some averages, what are those trends that are out there. What we found in Silicon Valley in particular is that overall, Silicon Valley is about average. CSR Hub scores from 1 to 100 with a floating average. And so any company that comes in that 50 range, they're average. They're not doing great. They're not doing horribly. Anything below the 15 range makes one question. Where is there room for improvement? Anything significantly over the 50 range, that's where we see that a company or even a sector is taking a leadership role. When we look here, we see that overall Silicon Valley companies are at best average, and none of them are exceeding. None of them are leading in any of their sectors or in any of the particular criteria. And given the perception that Silicon Valley are leaders overall, that they have a strong millennial employee workforce that are purpose-oriented, that they are focused on innovation, one would think that all of that translates to leadership and sustainability. But that was one of the big surprises that we had for 2016, and it's a surprise that remains now for 2019. The other thing that we notice is that when you are determining these scores for different companies, you're looking at different active sources of information. Some of those sources are the company's own reporting. Some of them are government filings. They could be legal filings. They can be aggregates of other reporting agencies. It could be information that we find in the media, particularly after a scandal. It might be information from associations that are looking at very specific kinds of information. So, for example, if we're looking at employment, one active source might be what is Glassdoor saying about your company or your organization. An average of 17 active sources per company, that's about par. That's a good number in order to be able to establish an understanding of where that company falls in comparison to other companies within its sector or within its region, depending on how it is you want to break that down for CSR Hub or for any of the ratings indices. So now let's get a little bit more specific. What we found when we looked at some of the trends that are important in North America from a broader perspective is that Silicon Valley is lagging in many areas, and one of those is the gender gap. They're significantly behind the national average of women in the workforce. And that's despite many initiatives, such as STEM initiatives, to bring women more strongly into the employment base, despite having universities in the Silicon Valley area and expanding out from that are highly focused on bringing more women into the workforce. Despite all those advantages, Silicon Valley is still lagging. Where there have been some successes and some positive movement has been in blockchain and AI. And that makes a lot of sense since it is the technology sector and they're looking at different forms of technology in order to move sustainability forward. So in particular with blockchain, we're looking at how we can use information and information tracking, transparency, and the inability to change blockchain. Blockchain makes it so that the data that entered remains unless everyone in that data stream agrees to change it. So it helps with that transparency in particular. And we're seeing lots of good, promising applications where it comes to human rights, fair work practices, definitely where we're looking at healthcare, where we're looking at the provenance of the different resources and materials that are being used. Blockchain is showing to be a real advantage in keeping that supply chain straight. No excuses allowed when data that is entered cannot be manipulated. Now AI, artificial intelligence, also has a lot of applications for sustainability. But it's been a greater challenge to work around AI in a positive way because let's face it, AI is programmed by humans and humans are fallible. Humans have their own biases, have poor decision-making practices, and all of that can be programmed into AI. Even malevolent use can be programmed into AI. So while there are many possible positive applications in AI for sustainability, particularly when you think about increased efficiencies, we also have to keep in mind that the risks are higher there, the opportunities to manipulate them. But I want to give an example for blockchain and for AI that we have found really particularly interesting. So when we're looking at blockchain, you can mark a building as serving a particular purpose. And in a war zone, you can mark a building perhaps as being a safe place. Maybe it's a hospital. You mark it as a hospital, you put that information out there, you make sure that it is appearing on the map, you make sure that it's appearing within the different treaties, you make sure that this is common information that can't be changed, and then if that particular building suffers damage, the organization that damages it can be held accountable. That is all tracked within that blockchain system. That's one of the many promising applications that we see. A promising application for AI is when you start thinking about predictive algorithms. Let's get ahead of the efficiency curve. Let's use AI for prevention. One interesting application that we have seen is to determine ahead of time where there may be leaks in a pipeline system. It's been applied to water specifically to preempt where there may be a leak in a water line. It saves time, it saves the water itself. It is able to get into that infrastructure and deal with it ahead of time. Thank you for joining this webinar on sustainability trends in Silicon Valley. We are happy to take questions offline, and we appreciate your joining us for this information session. As I said before, I'm Rosalinda Sanquiche. I'm representing the Center for Sustainability and Excellence, and this is one in our continuing series on research in North America and in Europe, focusing on different aspects of sustainability strategy and reporting trends. We hope you join us for our next webinar, and we welcome your feedback. Thank you.